I think so because it's socially acceptable in college to drink.
Why?
Because it's illegal.
I shot him. I'm playing.
It's part of what you do.
Oh, you're bleeding.
Parties are the norm, drinking games are the norm. It's if say they're in college, their hands are full. They got a full class load, friends, after hours, after school hours. I think it goes unnoticed. And looked at it from a clinical point of view, it's binge drinking.
Binge drinking essentially is drinking a large amount of alcohol in a short amount of time.
From the time I started drinking, I guess in my early teens, one drink was never enough. And they say if you can't have one, have none. I never went out or drank at home with the intentions of having one drink. I wanted to drink for the effect. I looked to get obliterated, and most of the time I accomplished that. And I didn't want to admit that I was an alcoholic because, like we've said, I didn't know if I was truly an alcoholic. I didn't know how to categorize my drinking. If anything, I thought I was a binge drinker, and I drank too much on the weekends. And,
What I would do is I would decide when I was going to go out that I was only going to have 2 drinks. And because one drink, is kind of pointless, but 2 drinks, I could get a nice buzz and not really have any consequences. But what would happen is sometimes, it didn't always happen, but sometimes I'd have that second drink and then I'd decide, oh, what the hell, I'll just have another one.
Once I had a drink, there was no stopping me after that point. I just continued until I either blacked out, passed out, or couldn't drink anymore.
And before I knew it, I would have had, like 6 vodka gimlets or gin and tonics or 7 or 8, or I would just drink until I, wherever I was, it was over.
Some people, it's very normal to go to that extent of, well, I go and I drink every night after I get out of work and I have a couple glasses of wine, and that's okay for you. You don't think that it's a problem. But then somewhere along the line, it starts to cross that internal, like that moral dilemma kind of hits inside of you, and I think that's where you know that it's a problem.
I think there's, a fine line between having fun and being social and then realizing you have a problem.
There's a lot of people that after a long day at work, they come home, they have a beer, they have a glass of wine, and then they get up and they go to their job the next day, they do a great job, they come home, they unwind, have a glass of wine, have a beer. That's not an addiction. Their life is manageable. They're paying their bills. They're handling their responsibilities. Really, it all comes down to life becoming unmanageable, okay? In college, for instance, if you're missing classes, if you're missing assignments, if you're, sleeping later than you normally do, or, waking up feeling, hungover more often than one normally would, I guess.
Alcoholism is a diagnosis that is given to a person when they are addicted to alcohol. It doesn't have to be every single type of alcohol. It can be, beer versus liquor, that kind of thing. But it comes to a point where you drink so much that you rely on it to function.
When I, finally realized that if I wasn't drinking, I was thinking about drinking. Part of the reason is, especially when you're in an environment with a lot of other young people and there's a lot of parties, is that, you're just partying. It's what everybody's doing. And the consequences aren't that big of a deal other than, you have a hangover.
Oh man. Well, I know for me, when I was younger, I always had in the back of my mind that there was something a little different from the way that I drank from other people and the way that um, I wanted it to do something for me, that maybe wasn't just going out and hanging out partying with my friends. There was a difference there.
Essentially, if you're around it all the time and it becomes something you just do, it can be very easy to become addicted. It can happen without you even realizing it.
I think decision making, it clouds your decision making. Your inhibitions are low.
It's when responsibilities start to go unhandled that addiction is most likely starting to knock on the door.
There are times when, people flunk out of college because, they don't even bother to, they don't go to class.
Things kept happening and relationships kept getting lost, friends kept getting lost, and, there was blackout periods that I don't remember, events that occurred or being told, do you remember what you did last night? And that's scary.
I would kind of design my life around being able to drink. So if my kids needed to do something or needed a ride, I would always want to take them as opposed to pick them up because I didn't want to drive drunk.
I drove multiple times. I was caught 3 of the times and have had 3 DUIs, but all the unaccounted times that I drove and somehow made it home, I have no idea how that happened or how lucky I am. And it took not 1 DUI, not 2, but 3, and totaling my vehicle for me to come to some realization that there was a true issue at hand, and I'm just very lucky that I didn't kill myself or someone else in the process.
But I was one of those people that people refer to as a not yet because I didn't have a DUI, I didn't lose a job or any of that stuff. But I knew it was coming because I had less and less control.
You're like, I would never drink and drive, but you get that first few drinks and you're ready to go and you take the keys and no one can tell you any different. You get behind the wheel anyway.
We'll start with things like hangovers, headaches, not feeling well, flu-like symptoms the next day. But over time, years and years down the road, it can affect your liver, it can affect your heart, and those 2 things are essential to how your body works. The liver filters out bad things when you eat and drink, and your body goes through all these processes, and your heart obviously pumps blood around your entire body. And so initially, if you drink a lot, if you have a long history of drinking, such as alcoholics and binge drinkers, you won't see any consequences for years, decades even maybe, and then all of a sudden your liver will start to fail. The toxins build up in your body, and your body has a hard time filtering out and processing all these bad things that get stuck in there because alcohol can destroy your liver.
With alcohol, it was I could wait until, I have liver failure or, my kids won't talk to me anymore or I lose my job. I mean, something bad was going to happen because something bad always happens.
It comes to a point where you drink so much that you rely on it to function.
Now, part of the reason I drank was because I was kind of shy and I was uncomfortable in new situations. So if I had a couple drinks, then I would feel more social and it'd be easier to talk to people. So that was part of it. It was like a coping mechanism.
The problem is that I was so young that I felt like my whole life was going to fall apart if I wasn't a part of, So the same reason that I started drinking was the same reason that I was afraid to stop drinking, because it's kind of like, well, if you take away my alcohol, then you take away my friends, you take away where I'm going, most nights of the week, and what am I going to do without it?
Even when I knew at a younger age, probably in my early 20s, that I had a problem with drinking, but I wasn't ready to give that up yet because I wasn't even 20, 21, 22. I still wanted to go out. I still wanted to have fun like everybody else. I didn't want that taken from me.
I think they're afraid, afraid to really speak out and say, hey, I've got a problem. Asking for help is like the hardest thing to do, at any age. And, as a kid, I remember just wanting to do something, and it's like my mom was like, let me help you. And I was like, no, I'll get it, Like, I was just adamant that one day, somehow, I was going to be able to get this.
I think it's just, there's a lot of reasons why people don't do it. And it's really, I don't know, when you're in, it feels to me like in those ages, you're just so impulsive, it's really hard to take something seriously.
Someday, I can stop this whenever I want to. Our brains just talk us into thinking that I got this, And as a child, or being 14 years old, to go to my mom or my dad and say, hey, I'm using drugs, first of all, that's just, not something that anybody really, wants to admit to your parents, because you're afraid of the consequences.
Plus, if you're an alcoholic, you hope it's not true, because you really don't want to give up drinking, which is part of being an alcoholic, is that you don't really want to give up drinking.
Put that big, block in between you and the drug or the alcohol, and separate you from that without having that temptation, removing the compulsion and the obsession.
Addiction to things like alcohol can sneak up on you.
I was watching a movie last night that they were in 6th grade, and it was a thing amongst their friends to sip a beer. It was like the coolest kid in school was able to take 3 sips, and no one's beaten his record. And that was, impressive to them. That was like a badge of honor. I took 3 sips of a beer.
And if you watch movies or in the, whatever, in different generations, that's what everybody did.
There was a point in time where, like, The Hangover, movies like that, and there's a lot of shows where movies where they're just glorifying alcohol and not remembering and having those blackouts. And it's funny to us, but there's that other side of it, that of consequences that really show itself outside of like the big screen. Like those consequences can have lifelong consequences on our life that can be pretty devastating. So it looks like it's a lot of fun when you're watching it in a movie, but when you're actually living that life, you realize that there's way more to it.
There's advertisements everywhere. Everything you watch on TV is, they're drinking, bourbon or something, and you're like, it's part of being an alcoholic is that it's like an obsession of the body and the mind. And so on the one hand, you crave it because your body wants it, but on the other hand, you become obsessed with it because just everything triggers wanting a drink. So if you'll see it on TV, you'll say, oh, that looks good.
When it's looked at it in that way, it's you're watching your parents drink. It's okay. You can go to the store and you can buy it. It's not illegal. I mean, yeah, there's a drinking age, but it's not as controversial as cocaine or heroin. So yeah, I think it can start at a young age, and when you get into college, the mindset is that alcohol isn't bad for you. It's not, it's not a drug, but it very much is a drug. That's why there's a group, Alcoholics Anonymous, started in 1935 because of that exact reason, that alcohol is a drug and it can ruin lives.
A 12-step program, I believe, refers to things like AA and Narcotics Anonymous and things like that.
The way the program works, it's all about 12 steps. You go through the 12 steps in order, and that helps you to reclaim your life. The first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. That's it right there. When life becomes unmanageable, addiction has taken hold.
And then from that point on, you go through the book, and the book pretty much instructs you and gives you all the basic text on how to get through those steps, and they build upon each other. And as they do that, the expectation is that you gain a powerful spiritual experience, so that one, you can give it away to other people and help other people, and two, so that you can put that big, you know, block in between you and the drug or the alcohol, and separate you from that without having that temptation, removing the compulsion and the obsession.
So I would say that, you know, not many people come in early, which I would say is in your 20s.
I'll tell you what, when I went in there, my thought process was I was going to be around a bunch of old drunks, you know, and a bunch of old people that had lived their whole life. And again, because I didn't think, I thought I was kind of young coming into this, you know. I didn't think that there was going to be, I had it set that there was going to be like 67-year-old men in the rooms, and that was it. And it turns out that they're like many and varied. You know, we've got 14-year-olds that sit next to me talking about I OD'd in the bathroom at school, and we've got 82-year-olds talking about, you know, still doing this thing, and whether or not they are sober or not, they're still trying.
And women. So there is no average age. It really highlights how addiction doesn't discriminate. Doesn't care about what color you are, what neighborhood you're from, how old you are, if you're a man or a woman. Doesn't care about your education. You know, addiction can grab a hold of anyone at any time.
I'm 66.
I am 31 years old.
41.
That's part of why it's sometimes hard for younger people to relate, because there's a lot of older people. So they think, well, I can't relate to these old people. But what we find out is that we're all the same. We all did the same things. It's just a question of how many times we did them.
I'm starting to notice that a lot more shows are incorporating addiction and recovery. When I was growing up, it wasn't like that.
More people seem to be coming in the last maybe 10 years, because awareness has gotten so much better, and because of the consequences of DUIs are so much more extreme.
I'm in recovery myself. I was sharing my story around town. One thing I realized from my experience is that I can help others learn from the mistakes that I made only if I share my story. You know, there's more than one road to recovery. Someone who has struggled with active addiction can need a lot to really re-enter society successfully. So if you have a friend, you know, you're starting to see their behaviors change, you know, their patterns change, you know, and they're starting to just kind of fall off a little bit, you know, that might be a good sign that something's going on with them, that, you know, they might have a substance abuse issue. I recommend that everyone attend an Alcoholics Anonymous or a Narcotics Anonymous open meeting. Reason being is you're going to hear some stories. You're going to hear some experiences that someone went through that was struggling with that, you know, substance abuse. And it'll really, it's good education. It really teaches you about the dangers, you know, the effects of substance abuse. And, you know, I remember the commercials, this is your brain on drugs, and the egg was frying in the pan, and that taught us nothing. Absolutely nothing. What does that mean? My brain is an egg and it's frying in a pan? That doesn't teach you anything. But you come to a meeting, you're going to learn what the dangers are. So I recommend that everyone come to one meeting, at least one meeting, and check it out and learn about those dangers. I recommend that parents bring their kids to meetings. When I see parents in the meetings with their kids, you know, not super young, but, you know, when they're old enough to really understand and absorb the content, it makes me proud to see that, because that child is not just being told you shouldn't do drugs and not given a reason why. They're seeing the reason why. They're in the meeting, in the room, firsthand absorbing the reason why they shouldn't use drugs. And that's the kind of thing that's going to sink in.
I know I did. another trick, and we're like, what the fuck? And then you.
I punched.
She
She
was like, yes. She was like, oh my god.
Yeah, that's me. I would do that all the time now.
No.
Yes, let's go. Alright.
I'll get robbed tonight.
His ball went. Ah.
Right out.
Ah.
What?
We get robbed. Hey, it's this side, I'm telling you.
No, it's not.